Hi everyone, welcome to the fifth meeting for the AI Engineering Book Club. And today we are going to talk about a very important topic that probably all of you have worked on and tried that before, which is prompt engineering. And before we start, a quick announcement, which I share in the Discord as well. So after the 10th week, the conclusion of all the book club readings, we are also going to schedule some time for the project demo. So I will encourage you to use the opportunity to share any of the AI side projects you did. Anything maybe somehow relevant to any topics in this book, use that opportunity to share and find feedback from the community. So you can find that Excel sheet in the AI eBook Club channel within the Discord server. And you can put your name and project name there. And once we have enough participants, and we can find out time that would work out. Yeah, I'll start sharing my screen. Could everyone see my screen?
Yes, I can see.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, so first of all, what is prompt engineering? In the book, the author defines that as the process of crafting an instruction that gets a model to generate the desired output. So I think there are some keywords here. So the first one is crafting. So crafting is more than just writing. It means, you write and improve and also get the model to generate the desired output, which means you should have the outcome and the goal have in mind, and you want the model to perform. Otherwise, the model will not understand what you want to do with it if you yourself don't have a very clear desired outcome. So on a higher level, it really is about making human to AI communication more effectively. Because thinking about the human to human communication, which we all do every day, we speak language, either it's English or Hindi, is that we want to convey the message to the other parties so that they understand and to understand what we want them to do or to understand what the feelings we want to share with them. And especially regarding the model itself, sometimes we don't have enough knowledge about the inner workings. So for doing the prompt journey, we really need to do the experiment tracking, evaluation, and data set curation. It's not just making the edits to the prompt and hoping to see it works. We need to adopt a more holistic and engineering best practices to do the prompt journey if we want to do that at a bigger scale and for production applications. So yeah, next we will talk about what is the prompting. So a prompt essentially is the instruction given to your model to perform a certain task. So this is pretty straightforward to understand. And I think we have a question. I think just notice there. Yeah, so it's about we need to experiment with different prompt structures to find out which works best for us. And usually the preferred format is like the following. We give it a task description, example and also the needed task input itself. So this is essentially the common format for working for the multitask. So let me break down that. So firstly, in the description, we tell them, oh, if you have a text and extract all the entities to do the extraction, and otherwise separate by column. So to really make the model understand what you want to do, here you provide it as an example. For example, this test message and the entities there could be the Brave New World, which is the book name, and also the author name. But we don't want the other information if it's not a entity. And the task here, so here the symbol here basically means that the text that you want to extract entity from is a variable. You can pass that into the prompts, which is a dynamic variable that it changes depending on the user inputs. So this way, the output from this model should be the entity from the given text. And next, we're going to talk about some common practices in prompting. So the first one is in-context learning, and there are two commonly used ones. So one is zero shot, another is free shot. So in-context learning is about teaching models what to do by the prompts. And providing the model with the context allows the model to incorporate new information continually to make decisions, preventing it from becoming outdated. Because the data that the model was trained on might not be the desired language or information for your given task. So providing enough context will be super helpful here. So short basically here means example provided in the prompt. As in the previous example, it's one shot learning because we give the model one example to learn from. And we can also give them more shots, but that also means more token and more cost. Next is, I think of it as kind of like less well-known topic called system prompt and user prompt. And so basically here, system prompt is essentially the task description, such as some role-playing instruction, and the user prompt as the task. And here you want to use the model's chat template. So what does that mean here? So here is a screenshot I took from the OpenAI codebook. So for the OpenAI's model, GPT-4 model specifically, it has this kind of template where you can define the role of the system and the user. So here you basically explicitly tell the model that you are a helpful assistant and then doing this certain kind of task. And for some other models, this sort of system prompt could be something defined as some tags, similar to the HTML tags. So using the some certain symbols. So whether it is this more like dictionary or using the tag symbol, the idea is to tell the model that given them some system prompts. So this is just more about letting the model to pick up which part of information is the system prompt versus the user prompt. Because otherwise, if the model might not know, like this sentence, you are a helpful assistant, is more like a system prompt or just part of a task. So next topic is the context length and context efficiency. So what is context length? So this is a commonly used word in the news, like a new model might increase their context window by certain much and much. So for example, several years ago, the content just be several thousands of tokens, but now most of the model have several millions of the tokens, which is very long. So this means that the model essentially have better memory of the context or the previous information and charts. So this essentially makes the model more powerful, that it can take in more information by making the outputs. And also there is some research find out that the model might be better at understanding instructions given the beginning and the end of the prompt versus the middle. But that might also depends on the particular model provider as well. But essentially, this is all something that we need to do a lot of experiments and try out the best output. Also, there's a suggestion from the book is that if the model's performance goes increasingly worse with the longer text context, then perhaps you should find a way to shorten your prompts, because sometimes giving the model the context too much might not be helpful, but making the output worse because it doesn't have don't know where to pick up the most important information. Yeah, so next, let's talk about the best practices of prompt engineering. So there are so many prompt engineering documentations and topics, discussions online, especially on some social media, but sometimes these are just hacky tricks. Things like, oh, telling the model that I will give you a $200 tip if you do certain things. So this book really focuses on the general techniques instead of these tricks, which could be easily fixed or avoided by the newer model. So the first best practice here is write the clear and explicit instructions. So I think the way to think about here is more about similar to the communication 101, similar to our English communication or any language, human language communication, how to convey the information effectively to the other person. So the first is to speak very clearly without any ambiguity, using like acronyms or certain terminologies that might be too specific to the company or industry. And you also sometimes want the model to adopt a persona, like you are a certain assistant or you are, say if you want to grade an essay, and then the output will be dramatically different if the model is using the persona of a middle school teacher versus a professor. You also want to provide examples. It's similar to the way we communicate people using some analogies so that other people can understand that. We also want to specify the output format, like JSON format, or we just want the entity names instead of the full sentence. Because the output format, usually we want to use that in the downstream task or store in the database. So we want it in a structured and expected format. And the next thing is provide sufficient context. So just like if we are talking here, I'm saying today we are the chapter 5 of the meeting. You all know the context here. We are talking about this book. But if I just talk what I said to a random people on the street, the other people will be very confused. What is chapter 5 and what does that mean? And people may be even asking, what is AI engineering? It's because they don't have sufficient context. So this way, basically we assume the model don't have the context when we are prompting, and we can use some tools. And one of the popular tools is RAG. So essentially we get those context from using the retrieval augmented search from the database where they have using vaccine embedding, so that the model will have this additional information when giving us or performing the certain task. And the next one is to break the complex task into simpler subtasks. So this is also kind of straightforward. Let's say if your manager asks you to do a certain thing, it's pretty complex and it's a kind of big task, but you don't know what to start and how to do that step by step. So maybe you can ask them to basically break the big tasks into simpler ones, so that for each task, you can define the success and acceptance criteria. And you know, like after finishing task 1, and you will do task 2. So this way you can ensure for each the subtask, you can monitor and debugging very effectively. So to make sure that you are making the progress throughout each subtask instead of a ambiguous big task. The next tip is give the model time to think. So this is also interesting best practice, because usually in the production system, we want to minimize the latency, which means minimize the time for the model to think. But for certain tasks, especially the chain of thought, like the GPT-4 or certain models with the reasoning capability, we want the model to give the accurate answer instead of just any answer, right? So using the chain of thought technique, we ask the model to think step by step. Another is something called self-critique prompting, which means I think this is something I try to use a lot with the ChatGPT Copilot, because sometimes the code is generated just won't work. So I was asking them, after you generate the code, self-check again to make sure it can run and avoid the certain issues again. So this way, the latency might be longer because the model is more cautious, because we ask the model to check the answer. I feel this technique is very similar to when doing the math exam while we were students. Chain of thought is that for a more difficult question, we want to think step by step instead of just jumping to the answer. Self-critique is that after you finish all the questions, you spend some time to double check all the answers. And the next one is about iteration on your prompt, because this prompt is not something done once it gives the output. It really is something you want to version, experiment, and keep improving. I think it's something maybe if you're just doing a side project, you might not doing a lot of the versioning stuff, but for the to do things in a better standard, you need to invest some time into the versioning system, using some ways to do the experiment tracking of all the evaluation metrics. Because this way you can know which version or certain language of the prompt will give the best output. So this is similar to the idea in the ML ops, where you want to version the models with different, say, features and hyperparameters. And you do the experiment tracking, say, using MLflow, and evaluation metrics, say, using the F1 score. And this one, and this case, after running several experiments with different models, you can clearly see which one performed the best. Yeah, so the next one is, it's a good idea to evaluate certain prompt engineering tools, because there are lots of the tools out there, and also many of them actually are open source ones that you can include and probably don't need to worry too much about the data privacy. Yeah, because the thing about the proprietary or these cloud provider tools is that they will have access to the prompt, and sometimes the prompt, these inputs could be some sensitive information from the document, and that could be a concern for many of the use cases. So in this case, a lot of the open source tools could serve this task. And the idea here is really simple, is that you want using the tool, essentially it's kind of like a grammar correction, kind of like Grammarly, to help you write better prompts by following these best practices. All certain tools are specifically for guiding the model towards structured output like JSON format. So I think an analogy here you can use is the AutoML, say for the traditional machine learning, where the tool can help you fine-tune these models parameters and find out the best one. But yeah, again, it's very important to first define your evaluation matrix, because that is something whether you are using the best practices or the tools, you want to optimize the matrix there. And also, it's very important to organize and version the prompts, especially if you are a tons of prompts to run and in production. So one common best practice is to separate the prompt from the code repo. So think about this way: if we put the prompt in the backend API repo, and we change the prompt, essentially the version on GitHub is changed, which might not be a best idea here. And also sometimes the task of prompt engineering might be belonging to data scientists or machine learning engineers. So we also want to make it isolated from the API repo. So you can put the prompt into another repo and then input those metadata and its prompt information by making that repo essentially a Python library. And also here the book talk about you can also have storing those prompt metadata as a Python object. So Python object using things like a Pythonic as a way to limit the output formats for this metadata, because we don't want the score sometimes to be a string, sometimes to be a integer. We want to have a strict format as the object. And also the prompt catalog. So catalog basically not only the repo, but also is something making the user very easy to find the information, like the data catalog. So for example, I'm a user in a company and I want to find out what prompts are actually running in the production now, and what is the prompt text for different versions. And also more importantly, what are the downstream users for this prompt? Because one prompt could be used by different applications downstream. So if a prompt matrix deteriorates, I want to know what is the impact on the different applications. And also another important thing is that when you grow the use cases, there also be cost concerns. So you also want to monitor the cost changes, because sometimes maybe you give it a lot of the context, the metric get better, but also the cost is also more. So you also need to make the trade-off and see whether that is worthwhile. So next topic is about defensive prompt engineering. And I think it's something probably not the main job for most of AI engineering, but definitely something super important, just like cybersecurity and code security and privacy to to the daily task for a software engineer. That is definitely something that becoming more and more important and something we need to keep in mind on these risks, and also best ways to avoid those bad actors. So the risks, basically why this topic is important. If we do not use the prompt and also the safety guardrail carefully, there are a lot of the risks nowadays regarding with prompts. So one is remote code or tool execution. The hackers might using the prompt and somehow remotely execute your system. Data leak, which is a very common and recurrent topic. I think most recently, Samsung or another company, I think essentially if the user somehow put their secret information into the ChatGPT, and somehow a lot of these very sensitive patent data for their innovative products got leaked, which is really caused a lot of damage to these companies. Social harms is also about if the prompt gives very wrong information. And then maybe some people, if they trust too much on the AI, similar to the misinformation, they might make a bad decision, such as suicide, or perform some things that might cause some harms. Yeah. Also, the service interruption is if the prompt the hackers use and manipulate, make some issues with your system. And also the brand risk. So example using the book is about, if you remember the Google search, when they first roll out the AI answer, sometimes they give a very ridiculous answer. I think there's one example, it basically telling the user that you can eat rocks, which really makes people lose trust and raise a lot of concerns on these AI generated answers, and also put this big name brand to a risk. Yeah, so these are some prompt attacks to defend against. So one type of the first type of the attack is called prompt extraction. So the hackers use something called reverse prompt engineering by analyzing application outputs or by tricking the model into repeating the entire prompt, and which includes the system prompt as well. Because sometimes the prompt you use in the backend system has some very sensitive information, and you don't want to make that prompt exposed to the outside users. And the second one, prompt injection, essentially is about getting the model to do the bad things. So, for example, you want the passive phishing and active injection. So example, just similar to the software engineering example, like some user have like delete the database in their name, and somehow the school's database got deleted. Similar to the idea of the prompt have something like delete my database. So this sounds very silly, but it's actually something happened. Because a lot of use cases are text to SQL, and if somehow the text information they give is not, instead of the good ones like querying the best sales, but instead of like delete my order. So we need to put some sort of the guardrail against those attacks. Information extraction is that the book talks about some research that they found out there are certain ways where the model can give out the data. One interesting example mentioned in the book is that they found out in the past, like if you ask the ChatGPT to repeat the single word prompt many times, like forever loop, repeating the same word, and after certain iterations, it will then give out some certain person's address and personal information, which is very weird. But we need to make sure that the hackers cannot use these sort of tricks to find out to get the sensitive data from our database, or because otherwise it will lead to a lot of the issues. And there are two metrics we can use. One is the violation rate, is about percentage of successful attacks out of the all attempts. Another is the false refusal rate, and how often the model refuses a query when it's possible to answer safely. Because if it's so cautious and try to be safe, the model will just reject all the requests. So we need to find out the good practice and also define the success criteria for these metrics. And so I think here are the three key takeaways from this chapter. The first is the prompt engineering is really about providing the clear instructions with examples and relevant information that are essential. So no matter what the best practices or these tools that you are using, I think remember the two most information here is the clear instructions and the relevant information, because that's what it matters. And sometimes some simple tricks that you learn online might be worthwhile trying out. For example, ask the model to slow down, taking more time to think step by step using chain of thought techniques, because for certain tasks requiring reasoning, this could be effective. And lastly, we also need to pay attention on the increasingly dangerous prompt attack. So we need to have a robust security measurements and defense against these of malicious attacks, so that we can safely put the model and AI into production, and also making sure that we are protecting the sensitive data and information for our system and data. So yeah, that's all my summary for this chapter. Let me stop sharing. So definitely here is just a very high level overview of the prompt engineering. And for each model, they say there are official documents provided by the model provider on the most specific techniques that they recommend, such as the ChatGPT codebook. Yeah, anyone has any questions?
Like yeah, go ahead.
So has anyone here used this auto prompt engineering tools for their use cases? I was wondering, where do they really add value?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, the auto prompting tools.
Like DSPy and OpenPrompt.
So for me, I have not used that before, but when I read that from this book, I feel something that I can try out. Because for my experience, the best thing to improve the performance is more about using these template stuff, and also the few short examples. But I think it makes sense that these tools become more dominant, because each model has its own quirks and characteristics, if you may. So essentially, you don't want to spend long time on learning these things that maybe can get update it very quickly. So using this tool as an additional abstract layer, essentially, yeah, I think you can get the design output easier and faster. But I feel that there could also be something, an interesting topic for our demo meeting. If someone wants to share about their experience and examples of using these open source and auto prompting tools, I think that will be something very helpful and interesting. Amir, I think you have another question.
No, it was just regarding the previous question, just a sister question of that. With this, like, have you tried any tools which you liked with respect to prompt versioning and how people would have taken care of it? Because prompt versioning will need for each model, you need different, you might need to tweak your prompts with respect to different models if you want to use it or change it. So have you come across like anything else other than Llama Index, tag, and things?
Yeah. I think it's a fantastic question. So for me, I think it actually doesn't necessarily that you need to use this certain tool, but you can start from something very simple. Just like some config YAML file in the GitHub repo, Excel sheet, and like Google Drive. This can get you started, right? So it's something that I'm doing. So basically you don't need to have like certain like a feature store or complicated database or UI to store all this information. But if I just few prompts, you can, just manually track this information in the Excel sheet and with some links to say Google Drive or S3 bucket to store the artifacts or the output results, for example, on certain cloud storage. So this way you can easily see for each, and also you can just say manually integrate, increment the model version like V0, V1, things like that as a way to track the versions. So for me, I have not used any of the, like third-party tools, but just using Excel and Google Drive, I think can do most of the tasks here.
Like, can you see a barrier? Like, until this time, maybe I can use, because once you expand or you scale your prompts and things, you might like, do you see like in very future that, okay, there might be a chance, or you will be like, it's fine right now, we'll think about tomorrow?
Yeah, that's good idea. Yeah, but I think it's definitely just Git is needed here. So basically, you need to have the GitHub repo, and for each prompt you have the say folder, and under each folder you have the prompt and also the config files. So this way, if a user or a data engine software data scientist updates a prompt, at least you have all the history stored in the Git, and you can easily go back to see the other ones. And another thing is that if you have all this information in a database, you can also just spring up a very simple UI, like say using Streamlit, as a way for user to search and find these model versions.
Got it. Thanks.
But I feel this is something, definitely within a company, you need to invest some time and people resources to do that. So I think it's like a lot of the startups doing things similar to that and offering that as a service.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of, I feel, similar to the data catalog, and also the Rentis AI Google Cloud, basically better to version and keeping track of the experiments with the model results. Yeah, so similar to here, yeah, there are definitely a lot of tools out there.
Yeah, this LLM ops platforms like LangFuse and LangSmith, they also provide this.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
is basically you can store your prompts there and then fetch them in your code.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think still the question is regarding sometimes whether a company wants to use too many of these early stage tools out there, right? Because things get changed so quickly. And another thing about prompt is that sometimes the input could be containing sensitive information, like a user's PII or the user's data. So we don't want to store them in any of the actual places. So I think that's one concern I see against, say, using the another tools versus just the in-house simple tools. But I think if that data is not and the prompt is not sensitive itself, and also if the third-party tools are easy enough to use, yeah, I think it will be a better idea to adopt these tools instead of setting things up by yourself.
Yeah. So it's like a trade-off. You just have to know what trade-off you want to go ahead with.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I think because everything is new still, similar to the data engineering world, is really you to build a dashboard, you need to have so many different tools, and sometimes managing these tools and just it is a lot of headache.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
That's it.
And also this is just something I feel I think the most important thing here is that you want to keep track of these evaluation metrics and compare these metrics to find the best version. So I think that as long as the tools, no matter it's open source or simple Excel, as long as it performs that task, it should be sufficient. And also, I think the most important thing here is that in your backend app database, you also need to store the model version. So I think this is something I want to add on here is that, for example, it's just similar like you launch a new feature for your application, right? Maybe as a testing phase, it gets a better result, but after the launches, maybe the result is not better or even worse. So, or maybe sometimes you want to do some A/B testing, like show different prompt results to different users. So this way, in your backend database, it's really important to have a column, say specifically storing the version of your prompt, and maybe another database. It's more like a dimensional static database table where have the prompt details for each version, and then that version number or maybe just ID for that prompt, and used in the stored in the transactional table. So this way you know which prompt version is used to generate the output for that user, to what the user see. Yeah, that is something I didn't do initially in my side project, and later I found that it's very difficult to track and see how the different prompt version affect the users. Because essentially now, when we're talking AI products, is that what matters for the user is not a fancy UI effects or something. It's more on the output results from these AI models. So that is something we need to keep iterating and improving our defined metrics, is either like position or recall or other rates. But the way to do that is that we want to have different prompts and yeah, as a versioning essentially to see why certain things work better or worse.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the key baseline is here we just said we don't want to directly put the prompt into the API call in the backend and then just simply change the prompt passing there, because that way it will be very difficult to track in the GitHub, because in that file changes could also be changes to the other code, not the prompt itself. And as the use cases increase, it will be very difficult to see when the prompt gets changed.
Yes.
Yeah, because at least we have the version changes. On the data analytics side, we can know the causal effect, like, oh, maybe we start to use this version, and then we can clearly see the metrics from the production output actually get increased. So then that's something is becoming more measurable and traceable. Yeah, hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? Yeah, so next week, I think we're going to dive deep into probably one of the hottest topics through all these chapters, which is RAG and agent. And we will have 2 graduate students from UC Berkeley presenting each of the topics. Yeah, so stay tuned for the next meeting. But yeah, again, I mean, highly recommend spend some time just skim through the chapters to have a rough idea of all these different topics. So this way you can better follow along on the presentation and ask questions as well. Because, for example, the summary I have here, essentially are just the chapter subtitles. But when you read the book, you see a lot of the examples and references that Chip put together. So I think that's super helpful. Like, you get to see, actually, there are tons of interesting research people have done in also prompt engineering and attacking stuff, which I didn't know before. And also a lot of these graphs, data, and anecdotes from the book. I think it's very good information to help you better understanding the topic. Cool. Looks like no more other questions. So yeah, if you have any questions, yeah, feel free to ask in the Discord channel.